He expected innocence and compliance, but what he found shattered his expectations and awakened desires he didn't know he had. Asterisk, before starting the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And your opinion asterisk, the sun hung low in the western sky, casting long amber streaks across the rolling plains. The air smelled of sage and dust, carrying with it the familiar cadence of the Apache camp, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional clatter of pottery, and the distant echo of a drum. For years he had lived by the strict rhythms of tradition, every action measured, every word weighed, every desire disciplined. As he mounted his horse, he could feel the familiar tension coil in his chest. Today was not just another day. Today was the day he would seek a bride, a woman who would fulfill the exacting expectations of his people. He had imagined her countless times, young, slender, obedient, a reflection of purity itself. She would move with quiet grace, her eyes downcast in humility, her lips curving only in modest smiles. She would honor his strength, submit to his decisions, and preserve the sanctity of the traditions that had guided their people for generations. A woman like that would bring no chaos, no distraction, only stability, and he craved the certainty of control. The horse beneath him shifted nervously, as though sensing the weight of his anticipation. He had spent his youth mastering the bow, the spear, and the ways of the land. He had fought the harshness of winter and the uncertainty of the plains, and he believed himself prepared for any challenge. But this search for a partner, for a woman to join his life, was a different kind of trial. It was a test not of strength or skill, but of patience, judgment, and the capacity to command respect without yielding his own authority. The journey to the neighboring village was long, winding along sun-baked trails that shimmered in the heat. Along the way, he observed the landscape with practiced eyes, the twisting river reflecting the sky like liquid glass, the scattered rocks hiding small creatures, the distant mountains holding secrets that only the keenest eyes could discern. Yet, despite the beauty around him, his mind returned again and again to the woman he sought. Every leaf that fluttered in the breeze, every bird that took flight seemed to him a messenger of her arrival. Though he did not yet know what form she would take. As he approached the village, the smoke of cooking fires rose in thin spirals, and the hum of daily life became louder. Children laughed, chasing each other between the tents, their bare feet kicking up dust. Women carried baskets of fresh corn, their voices carrying over the chatter of the men who mended tools or prepared for the evening hunt. He dismounted, the stirrups clinking against the horse's flanks, and drew a slow, steadying breath. Every muscle in his body tensed and relaxed in a ritual of control he had perfected over the years. This was not just a visit. It was the first step in securing the life he had envisioned. He walked through the village with measured steps, observing the women as they moved with grace and purpose. Some were young and lithe, others fuller-bodied but no less capable, all immersed in their daily routines. He reminded himself to focus on what he sought: purity, youth, obedience, and not be distracted by qualities that did not fit the mold. Yet even as he reminded himself, he could not deny a subtle stirring of curiosity. Among the women, one figure stood apart. Her presence was magnetic, her movements fluid yet commanding, her laughter ringing out with a confidence that challenged the order he had long revered. A fahong revered, twinge of unease traveled through him. He was trained to command respect, to measure the worth of a person by how closely they conformed to expectations. And yet, the woman who had just glanced his way did not bow, did not lower her eyes, did not conform in any recognizable way. She seemed untamed, unbound, and entirely unafraid. For the first time in his life, he felt an unfamiliar sensation, something akin to anticipation, edged with uncertainty. The control he had taken for granted, the authority he wielded so naturally, suddenly seemed fragile in her presence. He straightened his shoulders, masking the ripple of surprise and curiosity. He had come to the village with a plan, with an expectation carved from tradition and desire. And yet, he could not shake the feeling that this day, this meeting, would not unfold as he had imagined. The air was thick with the scent of earth and possibility, and he could not yet know that the woman before him would challenge everything he thought he knew about control, desire, and the heart. The woman appeared as if from the sunlight itself, stepping lightly across the village square with a presence that seemed to bend the air around her. She carried no basket, no tools, no sign of servitude, only herself. Her hair fell in wild waves down her back, catching the last rays of the setting sun, and her eyes, dark and unflinching, met his gaze without hesitation. For a moment he could not move, caught in the sheer force of her presence. She was unlike any woman he had imagined. She was curvy, full-bodied in ways that spoke of vitality rather than fragility, and she moved with a confidence that seemed to fill the space around her. Her laugh rang out a clear, unrestrained sound, and it drew the attention of others in the square. She did not lower her eyes, did not offer the demure smile he had rehearsed in his mind, and certainly did not seem inclined to obey the unspoken rules he had long expected women to follow. A part of him recoiled. This was not the quiet, obedient figure he had come to find. This was a challenge. A wild spark ignited something in him, a mixture of irritation and fascination. He had spent years mastering control, honing his instincts to dominate situations, to bend circumstances to his will. And here was a woman who, with nothing more than a glance and a smile, seemed utterly beyond his grasp. "Are you the one seeking a bride?" she asked, her voice both melodic and edged with amusement. There was no deference in her tone, no hint of fear, only curiosity. She raised an eyebrow, and in that subtle movement lay a question. "Who do you think you are, and what makes you worthy?" He cleared his throat, feeling the weight of expectation in every word he was about to speak. "I am," he said, his voice steady though his mind raced. "I have come to seek a partner, a wife. One who honors the ways of our people, who respects tradition." She tilted her head, considering him with a sly smile. "And what if I honor some ways? But not all? Would that still satisfy you?" There was a teasing challenge in her question, and he felt a heat rise in his chest, a tug of desire he could not easily name. He wanted to assert control, to demand obedience, but every instinct in his body told him this would be a battle unlike any he had faced. In her presence, his carefully maintained certainty wavered. She did not shrink from him. She did not fear him. She seemed to occupy her own space fully, a force of nature he could neither predict nor command. "You are unlike any I have met," he said carefully, trying to regain some measure of authority. "Your ways, your presence, it is not what I expected." She laughed again, a soft, playful sound that carried through the village square. "Do you expect all that is valuable to fit in a neat, predictable shape?" she asked. "Perhaps what you need is not what you thought you wanted." Her words were simple, but they struck deep, unsettling the foundation of his long-held beliefs. For the first time, he noticed every detail of her, the curve of her cheek, the strength in her arms, the way she moved with a natural rhythm that needed no instruction. She was not fragile. She was not timid. She was alive, and alive on her own terms. The realization hit him with an intensity he had never known his control. His certainty was slipping, replaced by a strange, urgent fascination. The village around them seemed to fade into a blur. He was acutely aware of her, of the way she carried herself, the warmth of her presence, the challenge in her eyes. He had come expecting purity and obedience. Instead, he had found vitality, confidence, and an unspoken power that threatened to unravel the strict discipline of his heart. In that moment, he understood something profound. This meeting would not be simple, nor would it be obedient. She would test him, defy him, and perhaps even undo the control he had spent a lifetime perfecting. And yet, beneath the fear and surprise, a pulse of anticipation thrummed through him. He wanted to see how far she would go, how unrestrained she could be, and perhaps deep down, he wanted to surrender in ways he had never allowed himself to consider. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in crimson and gold. She held his gaze, unyielding and unafraid, and for the first time he realized that this encounter would change him. She was no ordinary woman. She was a force he could not ignore and a temptation he could not resist. The village square had emptied slightly by mid-afternoon, the air thick with heat and dust, yet he could not tear his eyes from her. She moved with purpose, carrying baskets of herbs she had gathered from the riverbank, her curves swaying in a rhythm that defied any expectation he had ever held. Every step, every glance, seemed to challenge the strict control he prized so highly. "I did not expect you to be like this," he said, finally breaking the silence that had stretched between them. He spoke carefully, trying to assert some measure of authority, though a flicker of uncertainty lingered beneath his words. She arched an eyebrow, the corner of her mouth curving in a mischievous half-smile. "Like what?" she asked innocently, though the gleam in her eyes suggested otherwise. "Like a woman who knows her own mind?" "Yes," he admitted, though the word felt strange on his tongue. It was not supposed to be easy to admit admiration or fascination. Respect for tradition had always demanded control, and yet, standing before her, he felt that control slipping. Her laughter, light and teasing, was like a gentle storm, stirring currents within him he had not anticipated. She leaned casually against a post, the sunlight catching the gold flecks in her hair, and regarded him with unwavering confidence. "You expect to command, to shape, to guide. But what if I do not wish to be shaped?" He felt a flush rise to his cheeks, part frustration, part intrigue. She was testing him, not with weapons, not with words meant to wound, but with her very presence. She forced him to question the rigid expectations he had carried like armor his entire life. He had prepared for obedience. She offered none. I am accustomed to a certain order," he said, carefully choosing his words. "A wife is meant to honor tradition, to follow, to respect." His voice faltered slightly, betraying the growing pull she had over him. "You unsettle me." "That's because I am not what you imagined," she said softly, stepping closer, her scent earthy and warm filling his senses. "Do you truly believe that obedience alone defines worth? Or is it strength, fire, and spirit that shape a person?" He swallowed hard, feeling the heat in his chest intensify. She had named the truth he had avoided acknowledging. That desire, fascination, and admiration could exist outside the strict boundaries of expectation. She was not just challenging him, she was awakening him. He tried to assert himself, to reclaim the control that had always defined him. "You test me," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "I am not so easily swayed." Her laugh was a caress and a provocation all at once. "Then perhaps you are not as strong as you believe," she teased, stepping closer until the warmth of her body brushed against his. She did not apologize for the intrusion. She made no effort to yield. She existed fully, defiantly, and the intensity of her presence made his pulse race. Every instinct told him to step back, to demand distance, to enforce the boundaries he had always maintained. And yet, every part of him wanted to lean in, to explore the dangerous, intoxicating energy she radiated. The clash of their wills was not violent. It was subtle, magnetic, a battle fought in glances, gestures, and the unspoken tension that wound tighter with each passing moment. "You are dangerous," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. Not in anger, but in awe. "You undermine everything I thought I knew." "And you," she countered, her lips curving in a knowing smile, "are more intrigued than you care to admit." The heat between them was tangible, a slow-burning fire that threatened to consume the careful boundaries he had drawn. He had expected control. She offered challenge. He had expected submission. She offered spark. And in that collision, something irreversible began, the first stirrings of desire, curiosity, and the recognition that neither of them would emerge unchanged. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the village, but neither moved to break the tension. It was a stalemate of spirit, a silent acknowledgement that the world they had known rules, traditions, expectations, would now be tested against a force neither could ignore. He had come seeking purity, but he had found fire, and the fire refused to be contained. The nights in the village carried a quiet magic, a rhythm punctuated by the crackle of fires, the rustle of tents, and the soft songs of the river weaving through the darkness. He found himself lingering near the edge of the square, his gaze following her movements, a magnetic pull that both confused and thrilled him. She moved through the evening with an easy confidence, speaking to others with warmth and laughter, yet her eyes always seemed to flicker toward him, daring him, inviting him, teasing him without a single word. For the first time in his life, he began to feel the stirrings of something beyond control. It was subtle at first, a tension in his chest, a heat in his pulse, a restless energy he could not suppress. He had expected obedience, purity, and calm. Instead, he felt fire unpredictable, consuming, undeniable. She had awakened him in ways he had never imagined, and he did not yet know whether he feared or craved it more. She approached him, carrying a small bowl of fresh herbs, and offered it with a coy smile. "You look restless," she said. "The world seems too still for you tonight." He took the bowl, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was electric, sending a shiver through him he could neither control nor deny. I am not used to being unsettled," he admitted, his voice low and uncertain. You unsettle me more than I thought possible." She laughed softly, a sound like water over smooth stones, and stepped closer, reducing the space between them to a whisper of air. "Perhaps it is time you learn that control is not always the answer," she said, her eyes gleaming with challenge. "Perhaps it is time to surrender. If only a little." He wanted to speak, to assert his authority, to demand distance. And yet, every part of him wanted to lean closer, to explore the thrill she provoked in him, to test the boundaries of his own restraint. He felt his carefully maintained discipline wobble, his instincts of command undermined by something far stronger: desire, curiosity, awe. They walked together along the riverbank, the night air cool against their skin, the stars reflecting in the water like fragments of fire. She spoke of her life, of her independence, her laughter mixing with stories of adventure and challenge. He listened, enraptured, feeling each word pull him further from the rigid expectations he had carried like armor. With every story, every glance, every brush of her hand against his, he felt the walls around his heart soften, his long-held control giving way to something more dangerous, more exhilarating. "You are changing me," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I knew who I was, what I desired. But you," he faltered, the words failing him. "You make me question everything." She stopped, turning to face him fully. Her expression softened, yet her fire remained. "Good," she said simply. "Questioning is the first step toward truth. And you, warrior, have never truly known what it means to be alive." Her presence was overwhelming, her warmth, her confidence, her sheer vitality. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel without restraint, to consider the possibility that desire could exist outside the bounds of obedience. He felt a shiver of something primal, something deep within him that had long been dormant, awaken. It was not just attraction, it was awe, fascination. and a recognition that the rigid rules he had always lived by could no longer contain the intensity she brought into his life. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his face, her fingers lingering against his skin. His breath caught, a rush of heat spreading through him. He wanted to pull away, to regain control, but the urge to lean into her touch, to feel the spark she ignited, was too strong. In that moment, he understood the truth he had denied for so long, that desire, passion, and connection could not be commanded. They had to be awakened, nurtured, and sometimes surrendered to Dot as the river whispered and the stars gleamed overhead. He felt a shift within himself, subtle but irreversible. She had undone the certainty he had clung to for so long. The warrior who had sought control now felt curiosity, vulnerability, and longing stir together in a fierce, intoxicating mix. The awakening was not sudden. It was slow, insistent, and utterly consuming. And for the first time, he wondered if surrendering might bring him more strength than he had ever known. The sun rose pale and golden over the horizon, casting light across the village and revealing the weight of expectation that hung heavy in the air. Today was not just another day. It was a day that would determine the path of their connection. The elders had noticed the growing closeness between the warrior and the woman. Whispers floated on the wind, questioning whether this bond honored the ways of their people. Tradition demanded obedience, purity, and adherence to the tribe's expectations, and yet, here was a union that seemed to defy every rule. He felt the weight of his responsibility pressing down like a stone on his chest. For the first time, he questioned whether his desires could coexist with the rigid structures of his world. The elder's eyes lingered on him with a mixture of scrutiny and expectation, measuring his ability to maintain authority, honor tradition, and uphold the reputation of his lineage. He had always been confident in his judgment, his discipline, and his control, but now uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his resolve. She approached him as he prepared for the ceremonial gathering, her presence calm yet undeniably powerful. She was aware of the test, aware that the tribe would observe her every word, gesture, and glance. Yet she walked with an unshakable confidence, as though the scrutiny of the elders could not diminish her spirit. She was a force of nature, and she seemed to thrive in the very tension that unnerved him. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered as they walked side by side toward the gathering. Her hand brushed lightly against his, a gentle but electrifying touch. "The eyes on us, the expectations, the judgment. And yet, here we are." He nodded, though his jaw was tight. "I do," he admitted, "and it is difficult. Everything I believed about tradition and control. It feels fragile in your presence." She smiled knowingly. "Good," she said softly. "Fragility can be strength if we embrace it. You have fought battles with weapons and instinct. Now you face a different kind of battle, a test of trust, respect, and understanding." The elders gathered at the ceremonial circle, their faces lined with years of authority and the weight of cultural memory. They watched him, watched her, and waited to see whether he could navigate the uncharted territory between desire and duty. It was not a test of strength with a bow or spear. It was a test of judgment, restraint, and openness to change. "Warrior," one elder began, his voice steady and commanding, "the woman you bring into our midst does not conform to the expectations we hold sacred. She is confident, independent, and unrestrained. Tell us why you seek to join your life with hers." He swallowed, feeling the full intensity of the moment. He had rehearsed words for such occasions, words that honored tradition and asserted control. Yet now, rehearsed lines felt hollow, inadequate. Looking at her, he realized that the truth he could offer would not be measured by conformity, but by recognition, by acknowledging the power, vitality, and courage she embodied. "She is not what I expected," he said finally, his voice ringing clear in the circle. She is stronger, wiser, and more alive than I could have imagined. She challenges me, teaches me, and awakens something in me I did not know existed. I seek to be with her not because she obeys, but because she inspires. Not because she conforms, but because she thrives. A murmur ran through the elders. It was unexpected, radical even. Yet in his words lay honesty, conviction, and respect not just for her, but for the traditions themselves. Interpreted through a lens of growth rather than rigid adherence, she stepped forward, her eyes meeting the elders with steady defiance tempered by grace. I honor your ways where they hold value, she said, but I will not hide my spirit. If you are to accept me, it will be because of who I am, not in spite of it. And I ask your blessing for the union we have chosen, grounded in respect, trust, and mutual understanding. The silence that followed was heavy, yet transformative. They had expected obedience. They witnessed courage. They had expected conformity. They observed authenticity. And in that moment, the warrior and the woman were not merely answering questions. They were reshaping expectations, redefining what it meant to honor tradition without sacrificing individuality. He took her hand, a simple gesture of unity and defiance, and felt a surge of certainty. The test was not about control. It was about recognition, respect, and the willingness to embrace the unexpected. Together, they had passed it not by yielding, but by standing boldly in their truth. Night had fallen over the village, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The fires burned low, casting flickering shadows across the tents and the riverbank where he and she now walked alone. The elders had returned to their homes, their judgment rendered, their expectations challenged. And yet, in the quiet that followed, he felt a tension he could no longer contain, the tension of a heart caught between tradition and desire, between control and surrender. He stopped by the edge of the river, the water reflecting the pale moonlight, and looked at her. She stood before him, her figure illuminated in the gentle glow, every curve, every movement, radiating confidence and strength. She had changed him, already shaken the rigid order he had long held, stirred passions he had thought dormant, but now, in the intimacy of the night, he realized that his true battle was within himself. He began, but the words faltered. He had spent a lifetime mastering control, maintaining a stoic discipline in every part of his life, yet here she was, unraveling him with nothing more than her presence. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, and admitted the truth that had been forming in the depths of his heart. I cannot command you. I cannot bend you to what I thought I wanted, and I do not wish to. Her eyes softened, and she stepped closer, brushing a hand along his arm. Then do not, she whispered. There is strength in surrender, you know? The strongest hearts are those willing to let go, to trust, to open themselves fully. He felt a rush of heat, a surge of something deeper than desire, something primal, sacred, and transformative. The realization hit him with startling clarity. His control had been an illusion. True strength was not in bending the world to his will, but in embracing the wildness of life, in acknowledging passion, vulnerability, and connection without fear. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for her, taking her hand in his. The touch was electric, sending a thrill through both of them. He stepped closer, their bodies mere inches apart, and felt the warmth of her against him. He had expected modesty, obedience, restraint, but she offered none of these things. Instead, she offered herself fully, alive, confident, and unafraid. I am yours, he said finally, not as a demand, not as a claim, but as a surrender. Not in control, not in expectation, but in trust, in willingness to be changed by you. A smile curved her lips, radiant and approving. And I am yours too, she replied. Not to command, not to yield, but to share, to challenge, to explore. The air between them was charged, the night holding them in a suspended sacred tension. Every touch, every glance, every brush of skin against skin spoke of a mutual awakening, a joining of hearts and desires that transcended tradition and expectation. He leaned closer, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, matching his own, and let go of the last remnants of rigidity that had defined him. He kissed her then, slowly at first, testing the new territory of trust and passion. She responded with equal fervor, their lips moving together in a conversation of desire and understanding. It was not a battle nor a conquest. It was a surrender, a melding of two wills into one shared fire. Every expectation he had carried the purity, the obedience, the control melted away, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth that love, passion, and respect could coexist in the freedom they created together. As the moon climbed higher, casting silver across the river, he rested his forehead against hers, breath mingling, hearts beating in synchrony. He realized, with a clarity that startled him, that the life he had imagined, the rigid, disciplined, controlled life, had been incomplete. She had shown him what it meant to live fully, to desire fully, and to surrender fully. And in that surrender, he had discovered a strength far greater than any he had wielded in battle, the strength to embrace love without fear, without control, and without compromise. The night embraced them, and for the first time he understood the depth of what she had given him: freedom, fire, and the permission to be fully alive. He had surrendered, and in surrender, he had found everything he had ever sought, an unbreakable bond forged not in obedience, but in trust, passion, and shared courage. The morning sun rose over the village with a brilliance that seemed to celebrate the day itself. The air was crisp and filled with a sense of earth, sage, and wildflowers. Today was the day their connection, forged through challenge, desire, and awakening, would be honored not just between them but before the eyes of the tribe. The elders had given their blessing after witnessing the courage, trust, and mutual respect that had transformed the warrior and the woman alike. He stood tall at the ceremonial circle, his heart steady yet alive with anticipation. Gone was the rigid expectation that had guided him for so long. In its place was a new awareness, a deep understanding of the balance between strength and surrender. Beside him, she moved with the same confidence and grace that had first unsettled him, her presence radiant, untamed, and utterly captivating. She had become both a challenge and a sanctuary, a mirror to his own awakening, and he felt the weight of the day balanced with the lightness of the freedom they had discovered together. Elders circled around them, their expressions softened by the recognition of transformation. They had seen the warrior confronted by desire and curiosity, and they had seen the woman assert her independence with unwavering dignity. Together, they had redefined what it meant to honor tradition not through blind obedience, but through courage, authenticity, and the strength to embrace love fully. One elder stepped forward, voice deep and solemn. Today, we witness a union not of mere obedience, but of respect, passion, and shared understanding. You come together as equals, not as master and servant, but as partners in life, bound by choice and courage. He turned to her, taking her hands in his, feeling the warmth and strength that had captivated him from the start. I vow, he said, his voice steady, to honor you not as one who commands, but as one who trusts, listens, and learns. I vow to celebrate your spirit, your fire, and your courage. I surrender not to fear, but to love, fully and without reservation. Her eyes glimmered with emotion, and she responded with equal conviction. And I vow to stand with you, not beneath you, not in submission, but as your partner in life. I will challenge you, support you, and walk beside you in truth and passion. Together we will navigate this world, honoring both tradition and the freedom we have found in each other. The words hung in the air, carried on the wind and reflected in the calm surface of the nearby river. The elders nodded, murmurs of approval passing among them, as the circle seemed to embrace not only the couple, but the very essence of what they had created, a bond forged in authenticity, passion, and mutual respect. He leaned forward, closing the final distance between them, their foreheads touching, breath mingling. The world seemed to narrow to the warmth of her presence, the steady rhythm of their hearts, and the unspoken promise that had carried them through trials, awakening, and surrender. He felt a thrill of completion and anticipation all at once, the certainty that this union was not the end, but the beginning of a life shaped by trust, courage, and shared desire. Their lips met in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce, a seal on the vows they had exchanged and the journey they had undertaken together. It was a kiss that spoke of passion restrained and unleashed, of control surrendered and trust embraced, of two souls finding their reflection in one another. Around them, the village seemed to pulse with life, acknowledging not just a ceremony, but a transformation. When they finally parted, hands still entwined, he looked into her eyes and saw the reflection of his own awakening. She had undone the rigid expectations he had carried for so long, and in their place had instilled courage, desire, and freedom. Together, they had created a bond that was unbreakable, not through submission or control, but through respect, passion, and shared strength. The elders stepped back, giving the couple space, and the village erupted in celebration. Songs, laughter, and the rhythmic beat of drums filled the air, echoing the union that had been forged not through conformity, but through love that dared to challenge, transform, and endure. As they walked hand in hand through the circle, the warrior realized with profound clarity that he had found not just a partner, but a force that complemented and completed him. She was no longer a test, a challenge, or a mystery. She was his equal, his confidant, and the heart that had taught him to surrender, to trust, and to live fully. And in that union, he discovered the true power of love, not to control, but to awaken, inspire, and endure. The village had returned to its rhythm, the hum of daily life filling the air with familiar patterns of work, laughter, and the gentle bustle of existence. Yet for him and her, the world had shifted, subtly and irreversibly. The warrior walked beside the woman who had challenged, undone, and ultimately awakened him. She moved with the same vitality and confidence that had first unsettled him. Yet now their steps were in harmony, a silent testament to the bond they had forged through desire, surrender, and mutual respect. He looked at her, tracing the curve of her smile, the glint in her eyes, and he understood the depth of change she had inspired within him. For years he had defined himself through control, discipline, and adherence to tradition. He had believed that strength was measured by mastery over circumstance, by the ability to bend the world to his will. And yet, in her presence, he had discovered a different kind of power, the power of vulnerability, of openness, of surrender. Their union had not been simple. It had challenged expectations, provoked whispers, and forced both of them to confront fear and desire in equal measure. The elders had tested him, the traditions had weighed heavily on their shoulders, and the tension between expectation and reality had threatened to unmoor him. But through it all, they had endured, not by yielding to convention, but by embracing authenticity, trust, and courage. The woman took his hand, her fingers curling around his in a gesture that was both intimate and reassuring. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. "The way everything has changed, yet somehow feels." "Right?" he nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Yes," he admitted. "I feel it in every part of me. You have shown me that love is not about control or obedience, but about trust, passion, and respect. You have awakened me to life in ways I did not know were possible." She leaned closer, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. And you have shown me that partnership is not only about independence, but also about connection. We are stronger together than apart, not because one leads and the other follows, but because we walk side by side, challenging and supporting each other. They stood together at the riverbank, the water reflecting the early morning light, calm and steady. It was as if the world itself acknowledged the transformation they had undergone. The warrior realized that his life had been incomplete before her arrival, confined by rules and expectations that had never accounted for the depth of feeling, passion, or freedom he now experienced. She had not merely entered his life, she had expanded it, broken open the walls he had built around his heart, and revealed the limitless potential of surrender and connection. The villagers passed by, nodding in recognition, some with curiosity, others with quiet admiration. They had witnessed the union, seen the courage it required, and come to understand that strength could take many forms. The warrior and the woman had not merely joined their lives, they had reshaped the understanding of partnership, proving that respect, desire, and authenticity could coexist within the framework of tradition. He turned to her, lifting her hand to his lips in a gentle kiss. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together. Not as master and servant, not as expectation and obedience, but as equals, as partners, as two hearts awakened." She smiled, eyes sparkling with warmth and fire. "And whatever comes," she replied, "we will meet it as one." Together, unafraid, fully alive. As they walked back toward the village, hand in hand, the warrior felt a serenity he had never known, a strength rooted not in control but in trust and passion. The woman who had challenged him, undone him, and awakened him now walked beside him as his equal, his companion, and his heart. The day unfolded with quiet beauty, the laughter of children, the songs of women preparing meals, the rhythmic beat of drums marking the passage of life. Yet amid the familiar rhythms, the warrior and the woman carried a new harmony, a shared pulse that resonated in every step, glance, and gesture. They had discovered that true power lay not in dominance, but in connection. True fulfillment came not from control, but from surrender to love that dared to be bold, authentic, and unrestrained. And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting golden light across the plains, he realized that he had found everything he had ever sought, not in conformity or control, but in the fiery, fearless heart of the woman who had forever changed him. Together they moved forward, side by side, bound by desire, trust, and a love that would endure, strong and unyielding, like the river that flowed endlessly at their feet.